Oh, we got a fancy announcement this time. That's new. It said this meeting was being recorded. Okay. Um, welcome to the Dialogue Doctor Book Club. I'm Jeff. Let's go around and say your name and tell us about a project you're working on. That's what I want to know. So I'm Jeff. I got a couple things going right now. I got a novel that I've been writing since November that is nonsensically long and not moving any faster, despite my urging for it to finish. And again, I don't think anybody's going to buy it or read it. So it's a tough one to write, because it's like, I'm having fun with this, but I don't know where it goes after this. It's completely out of genre, which is never a good idea. So I've got that one. And then I started, Amazon is doing this thing for short fiction, Vella, I think, where you like publish serial fiction. And a guy reached out to me that I really like this week. And so he and I started a Vella project. So we'll see if that pans out. We got to get I think we're trying to get 15 short stories done that like all link together. So we'll see. But yeah, so I'm Jeff. That's what I'm working on. Vince.
My name is Vince Stanley. I was on the other podcast with the Hemingway book. I've been trying to write a book for a while here, and I've been working on making a deck for my house.
Nice.
A good pandemic project. Those are the two projects I'm working on.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, a lot of time to catch up on my old podcast. So that's what I'm at.
Very cool. And Tom, you're a first timer with us.
Yes,
Let everybody
welcome.
know who you're at and where you're at and all that good stuff.
Geographically, I'm in New England. Unlike many people, the pandemic has made me insanely busy. I'm in retail, and we've in book selling, and we've held our own by basically running twice as fast. Wow. So same amount of money, twice as much work, which means I'm working on a project that I started 2 years ago and then stopped and then didn't touch for 10 months. And since it's a heist plot, it's a bad idea because I have to relearn the whole book.
Yeah.
It's the second book with the same characters, although they have different names in each book, but that's another story. And I also edit and do other author services, and I'm really excited about adding dialogue to my toolkit. Nice. Because I can recognize good dialogue, but telling people why their dialogue is bad and how to make it better is something that I hadn't even really entered my my thoughts. So I'm
awesome.
Happy about that.
Laura's the person to be around because she tells me my dialogue is bad all the time. And I feel your pain with the heist novel thing, because man, those details matter so much. You put that thing down, you're in trouble. I have done that myself. Laura.
So I'm Laura, and I am currently the other half of Jeff's Dialogue Doctor partnership, which means that I'm learning how to use Slack, and I'm learning how to use a calendar, because apparently I'm supposed to do something on Thursdays, and I don't know how Thursdays work. Sometimes it's Thursday morning, sometimes it's Friday. One week it was Sunday, but I'm working on that. Yeah, I'm working with a couple of first-time authors who are fantastic and have great stories that I get to read before anybody else does. So that's super exciting for me. And my pandemic project is digging out my house that I just let completely go during the pandemic. I was like, oh, I'll deal with that later. So now we're trying to find the living room again.
That's
lots of new Lego sets, lots of new organizational tools that are still in the boxes.
Yeah.
Room.
It's the appropriate place for them. I mean, you got to buy them all and line them up.
Yes.
Before you can decide which one you actually want to use to organize.
Yeah.
It's an important step in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I wouldn't recommend it to anyone.
Okay, so we have come together to discuss this book club, Borrowed Time by Tracy Clark. We read it and we're going to talk about it. Laura, do you want to give us some background on Tracy Clark? Since I was a complete slacker, we found out and did no research.
I was too. So Tracy Clark was born in Chicago. I'm reading this directly off of her website here.
Nice.
And she read a lot growing up and wanted to be a writer. Graduated from college and grad school, though her bio does not tell us from where. But given her affinity for Chicago, maybe in the Chicago area. But she writes a Chicago mystery series, which is actually how I found her. I got self-promoted into picking this month's book club book because I couldn't read any more.
Because you fired me. Because you fired me from picking books.
I didn't fire you. I gave you a sabbatical.
Fair.
So I was looking for something light and fun. And what's more light and fun than a murder mystery, right? I wanted something written by a local author. One of the things that I love best about the way Jeff writes and some of my other favorite authors is they write about one location. So I was really looking for that. And obviously I was looking for something with amazing dialogue. So as I was picking, I flipped through a bunch of books in the genre and just read the first chapter of, I probably read through 10 books before I came across this one, Borrowed Time by Tracy Clark. And immediately I fell in love with her main character, Cass Rains, because her opening scene, just the dialogue was so dynamic. And actually, she had this great trick that we'll talk about as we get into the book, where the character actually takes on a different persona than herself. So when she starts talking, she's talking in a persona, and then she changes to herself. And it's a trick that not a lot of people can pull off. And I was just enamored by it. So that is how we ended up with Borrowed Time. Borrowing Time?
Borrowed Time.
Borrowed Time.
Borrowed Time, past tense. Okay, let's go. First impressions on the book. What did you think? Anybody can go.
I can go first. I thought it was really well written. She had a lot of great characters in this. Probably one of the things that I wanted to talk about here is how all the characters like intermix, because she has like her core group of friends, and they're all like she protects them. The way that she interfaces with her friends is different than the way she interfaces with the clients that she takes on for what's the word, for serving papers. That's a different take. Then there's another different take for what we'll call villains. And like this character is extremely complex. And I thought that would kind of be a good shoe-in to understand how we could, as writers, can kind of take that to our own work.
Yeah, I love that. I want to come back to it. That's a really great note, Vince. And let's pick that up in a second again. Laura, Tom, what were your thoughts? What's your what were your first impressions of this story?
I will say that I sometimes have to remember that readers are readers and writers are writers. That I really enjoyed the book, and at the same time, I made a laundry list of things that I thought could have been done better. But I would read another book. I liked it.
Yeah, I think it's funny as a writer. Movies and books have been kind of ruined for me because I always have my like hat on, my like writer hat on. So like I open a book and I'm like, what is happening here? And why are we doing this thing with this? And where's this plot arc going? And why did we make this decision? And yeah.
Yes, my 12-year-old is super into it with me now too.
Yeah.
So she's always like, is this the all is lost moment?
Oh no. Yeah.
Well, I mean, every Marvel movie is like hero's journey. I mean, you can
Hero's
you can
Journey,
call them
right?
out.
Like pretty much like photocopied out of Save the Cat. Like let's just yeah. Yeah, I tell people, they'll always be like, "Hey, have you heard the Save the Cat thing? What is that?" And I'm like, "I'm not going to tell you because I will ruin every movie for you that is ever made. You will hate them all after you read Save the Cat." Yeah. Laura, first impressions?
I loved it. I was all in. I think that as an editor, finding a book that makes me forget to edit is always my goal. And there were a couple of places where I read a line and I was like, would I edit that? No, no, I wouldn't. And there are a couple of places where if it was a Jeff Elkins character, I would have edited the line. Because there are a lot of times where the main character repeats herself and will add something that's totally unnecessary, but she's so consistent with it. And it's like so to make a point that it's like, I couldn't, I wanted to, but I couldn't cross it out. So yeah, I was all in for the characters. I was all in for the story. There were some nice twists and turns in there. I kept like getting to a place in the story where I was like, okay, I'm at about 3/4 of the way through. And then I'd look down at my page count and I'm like, ooh, there's more. There's going to be a twist coming up. So that was really good. I'm sorry, my dog is chewing on a bone.
It's
Don't
Zoom
know if you
life.
can
You're good.
hear her or not.
Yeah, I think I was expecting, and I don't know why. Maybe because I use the word mystery for my books and they're actually thrillers, but I think I was expecting a thriller when I opened it up. And I was actually pleasantly surprised to find kind of a hard-boiled mystery where like the detective is kind of moving from one conversation to the next conversation, like slowly uncovering stuff. I was into it. And I enjoyed it. And she is man, Tracy Clark writes character centric, which I think is very cool. Meaning that like the conversation is the heart of each movement, right? Like so I thought that was really great. I enjoyed that. Okay, so let's go to the main character. Vince brought up that he saw some modulation in the main character in who she's talking to. So we've got Private Eye, and her name is completely slipping my mind right now, which is why I'm flipping through my pages.
That's right.
Thank you. It's like, how am I forgetting her name? Yeah, so PI doing work on the side, ex-cop, running around. Cass, what did we think of Cass? What do we think of Cass's voice?
She's snarky if she gets the drop on someone as the PI.
Yeah, super true. That opening scene where she's delivering a summons to a guy with a bodyguard. Lots of like, wait, I really enjoyed how that set the scene with her voice, which was great. And I don't know why, but I really like the like open line to people. I don't know why I enjoy that, but I know it's a detective novel trope where like the detective novel lies about their identity, but somewhere on the middle, she tells somebody that the person like wants her name because they want to get her in trouble. And she tells them she's Mary Meacham and she like spells it out over and over again. It was really great. She's, yeah, you know, anyway, I thought that was fun. Yeah. Any other thoughts on the main character? Tom, you look like you're going to say something.
Yeah, you gave a caveat at the beginning of this, and it's making me.
Okay, fair. I will take your reins off. Go ahead.
I really liked the internal narrative because all first person detective gumshoe books, the first person is the way to go, and it makes or breaks it. And I thought the first person narrative, which is, as you said before, is dialogue, I thought was really good. I was less impressed with the characters around Cass and thought that they were mostly flat.
Okay.
The one who I didn't know what they were going to say when they opened their mouths was the love interest, and he's barely in it. I'm guessing he's in it more in book 3, but
Weber. I think
he's the guy who every time he walked on the scene, I did not know what was going to come out of his mouth, but I knew what the waitress was going to say. I knew what Young was going to say. I knew what the friends were going to say. But I liked Cass a lot, and I thought the interior monologue was done very well. I would like to have seen her stubbornness used as a fault as well as a virtue. I don't think she ever paid a price for being unrelentingly stubborn.
Yeah, it is very much a series book in which like
Mhm.
she doesn't have a lot of character transformation. She's coming, it reminds me a lot of like a Jack Reacher book where she's like,
or like James Bond or whatever.
yeah.
But it is possible in that genre.
So I would say all the things that you found fault in, Tom, are things that I really enjoyed about the books.
That's
So
fair, because I also love Flannery O'Connor.
she's gifted, but was not in it for her story. No, I think the best characters as a reader are the characters where you're not surprised by what they're saying, because then their voices are true to who they are. And the dialogue scenes where like there's a scene in the middle where she has all of her friends over to kind of help her after she gets schooled by her neighbor. She has all of her friends over, and they each have a very distinct voice, and they each bring the piece of the puzzle that they need to bring to the story. And as a reader, that's very comforting, because people are true to who they're supposed to be. It's very disconcerting as a reader when you have a best friend who's supposed to be supportive and helpful and they're not. Now, that can obviously be an intentional thing on the part of the writer. But in a story like this, when you're here for the mystery and you're here for the people, having that group around the character who is predictable is actually a really great thing as a reader. And as far as her stubbornness, I would say there were lots of times where she did pay the price for her stubbornness, the love interest being one of them, right? Like she knows in the beginning of the book that the love interest is there, and her stubbornness is keeping him away. Her stubbornness is the reason why her friends are kept at arm's length until the middle of the story. So.
Any other thoughts on that? Laura disappeared.
I don't know how Zoom
She
works.
spoke and then we threw her off the call. We'll go on without her. Any other thoughts on that? If not, we'll move on. Okay, favorite character. Tons of side characters. Which one did you like the best? I'll go for it. Mine was
Jung.
Young was the best. Holy crap, dude.
Jung. Yeah, it was a masterful construction of the character. I knew exactly that this kid was a pothead without the author overtly saying this kid's a pothead. Like he was, what I really liked about him was he seemed to be the perfect counterpart to Cass Rains, because Cass Rains is like super reliable. Like you give her something, she's a hound dog. Like she will solve your problems. And then the Jung character is unreliable. Like he's forgetful. He's difficult to get a hold of. Like he's kind of the exact worst person to
He's
get
a liar.
hooked up with. Yeah, he's a liar. Like everything that she embodies, this guy's the opposite. I was like really frustrated with him, but I didn't recognize that it was good writing at first. I got a little bit wrapped up in it, which is to say I just enjoyed the book. So.
Yeah, I think there's a good, while they're opposites, there's also that good tie-in in their loyalty. They both have very loyal directions, which I think connects them, which is always good to have that like comparing and contrasting mode in characters. Yeah. Tom, you got any thoughts? Favorite character? Any thoughts on June?
I like Weber. I like Cass. I know she's the main character. I also like Whip.
Yeah.
And I think Whip is an example where I did not know what he was going to say.
Nice.
I knew that he was Cass's friend. And I knew that he was going to toe the line between being straight and, like there's this tension there of he's willing to break the law for Cass and she doesn't want him to do that because he's worked so hard to be straight. And I found meat in that in the way that I did not care for Young.
Yeah.
Again, because every time he he did not modulate his, he was the same play over and over again. I'm gonna go do it myself. It's like, well, why did you hire me? I'm gonna go do it myself. Well, why did you hire me? And that goes all the way through the book. He's a great plot mover because every time she needed to kick the plot up, he would tip something off, which was great. He served that purpose. But
yeah, he escalates.
But yeah, when I say I feel like a character is flat, I understand what you're saying about side characters and mysteries, and I totally get that. But I think you can do that and also have them be just deeper. I thought Whip did that. A lot of it is also, remember, this is book 2. So I'm guessing she's built some depth of character in book 1 that we're not privy to because we didn't read book 1. And she doesn't do a whole lot of she doesn't do a whole lot of explaining back book 1, which is fine.
Yeah, it was weird. She didn't ever give me like several pages of like, here's what happened in book 1, but she did. I never actually questioned who anybody was, which I was really impressed by. It took me about to page 50 to realize, like, I'm in book 2 and I know who, like, I remember when Weber first comes on the scene, she has like a paragraph explaining their first encounter at the hospital. And he makes a joke about how it was their first date. And I was impressed. I was like, man, that's a nice paragraph hit on like giving me the backstory without making me suffer through.
Yeah, by and large, I think she did that really well, maybe with the exception of Barb, who all of a sudden somebody was like, she's a nun? I'm like, oh, I didn't know she was a nun.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. But she even covered the last murder. She covered the priest's murder in like a paragraph and a half. And I was impressed. I was like, dang, you just hit a whole book in a paragraph and a half. It was nicely done with that.
But not in a way that made me feel like I didn't have to go back and read the first one.
Yeah, no, like that's what I'm saying is I got like 50 pages in before I was like, oh, I forgot that this was book 2. Yeah, I found I really liked Bucky T. I wanted more Bucky T. But yeah, I can't really tell you why I connected to Bucky T.
Because he sat and colored for 2 hours.
I think that might be
drinking milkshakes, and then was like, I don't have any money.
Yeah, I think and I really do think it was at the end when he asked her to pick up the tab. I really think I was like, Bucky T, you're my boy. But yeah, I liked it. Any other thoughts on characters? Any other characters pop out to you, or any other characters you want to talk about?
So I thought that...
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Maybe it'll better come up somewhere else, but I really like the time she spent on Cap, which was the marina worker.
That's exactly
what I thought was fascinating about Cap. You were?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, what I liked about the exchange with Cap was she didn't, because we see this world through the eyes of Cass Raines, we don't really see anything about young Bryson if she's not interested in it, we're not privy to it. But then there's this very tense scene where she talks with this marina worker named Cap, and Cap is very frustrating to talk to, and he's very manipulative. But you get the biggest explanation of any character, and it was frustrating for me to understand what she's doing, but rather than telling us, she showed us like Cass Raines like really buckled down, really tried to understand, like, is this guy lying to me? Like, what are his tattoos on his arm? What's going on with his like fingernails? Like, what's going on with his hair? Like, it was like pages and pages of description of this guy as she was grilling him, and he wasn't giving her anything. I really enjoyed that.
Nice.
And his voice was so distinct from everyone else's. The cadence of his voice, the words that he chose, even the punctuation she used with him, it was so different than any of the other characters. It was really like you could tell that this is a gnarly old man who spent his entire life at the marina, who was doing some unseemly things, who, you know, halfway through the book, we find out what those unseemly things are. And she knows it, like she's got her cop instincts, and the conversation between the two of them each time was so like precise from a dialogue standpoint. Everything moved the story forward, and yet as a reader, we didn't realize the story was being moved forward because we were just in it for the conversation.
Any other thoughts on characters? Any other characters pop out to you? Tom, you got any more that?
No. No, I think it's good to talk about the villain.
Yeah.
If you're talking characters.
Go for it.
I'm not saying I have any thoughts on it. I'm saying it's good to talk about.
Let's remember that when we're talking about the villain, we need to talk about a villain that shows up early on in the book, as to not spoil the ending.
Well, one of the things I wanted to say when Laura, when you said about, again, without being spoilery, but with you said what you said about feeling like you were 3/4 of the way through the book, but you weren't. And that's because I think she broke a couple tropes. And one of them was, I'm gonna say this without reading. I expected a reversal somewhere in the last quarter of the book. That didn't happen. And so the first half of the book was a following the clues, and then the second half was a trying to outsmart the known villain. Sometimes in a murder mystery, you don't know the villain until very late. Sometimes in a murder mystery, it's usually more of a thriller. You know the antagonist right at the beginning, and the question is, how are they going to come together, and what's going to happen?
Yeah, so often
that's more of a thriller. So I felt like it pivoted a bit in the middle from mystery to thriller, and especially as she starts to get some surprises from the villain, it made it more. I mean, one of the definitions of a thriller is that the victim is the main character, and that sort of happens about halfway through when the antagonist starts coming at her hard. Anyway, getting off point of character, but
it's an interesting thought. Do you feel like that trope breaking helped the story, or do you feel like it set you back? Again, this goes to what we were saying earlier about, like, as a writer, it's hard to pick up that writer hat. Like, I don't know that a reader would pick up on any of that, but
the only reason for me was that there was a part of me reading that kept waiting for
that.
A reveal. I had a different person pegged because I thought she had revealed the other person too early. It couldn't be that person because she had revealed them so early.
Yeah, and I didn't. I think playing with tropes is super dangerous, right? Like, because you can really frustrate a reader that way. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. I didn't find it frustrating this time, but I totally get what you're saying, that like you were waiting for that reversal and that like big surprise and the like, Scooby-Doo mask coming off. It's not the janitor, it's Old Man Withers. Yeah. 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 Any other thoughts on plot or twists or characters in general?
What I think I know the answer, but what do you all think of a kickoff chapter that doesn't tie into the plot? Some James Bond movies, the kickoff chapter is actually the MacGuffin. Other James Bond movies, it's just, oh my God, James Bond is awesome.
Yeah.
And in this one, it was, oh my God, James Bond is awesome. And it was one of the most entertaining chapters of the book. So
yeah,
I wouldn't get, as an editor, I wouldn't get rid of it, but I would say, can you write a chapter that's that awesome that also ties into what's happening? And maybe, again, most people wouldn't notice. It was a great introduction to the character, especially since we hadn't read book one, right? Because we hadn't read book one, it was like, here she is. She's smart. She's funny. She's sassy. She kicks ass. And it was great for that reason.
She's willing to sit in the moment just to entertain herself, which really drew me to the character. I like that she decides just to play with the guy for a little bit, just for her own personal.
But my editor hat was, if you took this chapter out, would it change the book?
Yes, it would have. And so again, as a reader, we don't know the tropes. We know what we like in genre, but we also like something a little bit different. And having every book follow the same formula sometimes is really rewarding to us. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's like, oh, this is going to be the opening scene that sets up the murder. I mean, shoot.
Here's the Ellis Moss moment where he cries.
I'm a huge fan of like cookie cutter, right? Like once I find an author, I'm going to read everything that author does. And I've watched every episode of Law and Order SVU for 22 seasons, and they do the exact same formula for 22 seasons. So, I'm all in for that. But I think if as editors and as writers, all we're doing is taking the formula and plugging our content in, we're creating a missed opportunity for our readers, especially at the beginning of a second book where the characters are already established. And the way that we learn so much about who Cass is and what she does from that scene, because it doesn't tie to the main plot of the storyline. It really gives us the opportunity. And also, it's a first person. So for the way the mystery was unfolding, putting the first scene being, oh, there's a dog. So anyway, I was all in for it. I don't have to keep rehashing that.
Yeah, I think, oh, I'm sorry. Was somebody else going to say something? Vince, were you going to talk?
Yeah, the way I understood the kickoff chapter was that it was establishing the ordinary world where she was serving summons, and they're not exactly like bright and shiny fun cases. They're just something she does to pay the bills. She is completely overqualified to do them because she really wants to do these big cases, which then I took it meant that when young Bryson shows up with like something she cares about, she will give him a discounted price because that's really what gets her out of bed. And then like she gets tortured the whole way through the book because like that is her art. She'd rather be spending her time doing like an actual serious murder case than delivering summons, which, she's above that. That's the way I took that. And in answer to your question, I do feel that the character would be the same, but I feel like that establishes, her view on the world. And that would be what was lost. That's all I got.
Yeah, and I think I lean more toward Tom. I wouldn't, if Tracy Clark had sent me this book to edit, I would not have gotten rid of that first scene because it is super engaging. It's super great. I might have wanted to work it into the larger plot though, like just for efficiency's sake. But I loved it. I thought it was a really well written and beautiful scene, and it did establish the world, and it did, I think, and this is me taking off my reader hat and just 100% putting on my like writer marketer hat. When we're in book 2, the question we always have to face is like, do we expect the reader to read book 1? Right? Like, do we make them want to go back and read book 1? And my first series, I made a huge mistake by like, you have to read the first books 1 and 2 to understand book 3. You can't actually even talk about you can't even engage with book 3. Book 3 is so weird. Excuse my dog being a spaz. Book 3 is so weird that it's hard to read without 1 and 2. So yeah, I in that way I felt like, man, this is really smart to be able to like kick this book off and me not have to read books 2 and books 1 first, but for efficiency's sake, I was like, I wonder if we could do that. And I will say the thing that I would change about the book, like if I were editing Tracy Clark, she starts every chapter off with a full page of prose. And it's that like semi dialogue because it's first person. So it's the like, um, I'm talking to myself kind of dialogue. And, and this is one of my personal pet peeves. I always want you to put it in your mouth. So like put it in the character's mouth, take it out of the page and a half of prose. And as I got to like, the middle of the book, I found myself skipping the first of each chapter. I was like, I don't need it. I just go to where she was talking to somebody and be like, okay, I could read again. So yeah, that would be my if I were going to edit something, that would be it. Any other thoughts on that?
Funny you should say that, Jeff, because your new series, the first 2 books, both start with an opening scene that have nothing to do with your main storyline, but it's where you engage with Mo the most, and it's what draws you in to the storyline.
And I did it on purpose. Well, yeah, I did it on purpose. In my defense, the first 2 chapters both introduce characters that come back.
I'm not
Right.
I'm not at all disparaging it. I love it.
I know.
As a reader who is going to read a series, I'm not reading the series for the murder.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter in the end as a reader who did it. I'm there for the characters. And that opening scene helps me see who Cass Rains is in the same way your opening scenes let me know who Mo is. And they're the reason that I'm all in for the rest of the book and then the rest of the series.
Yeah.
So if you had started it in the middle of like the mystery, I might not have been able to fall in love with them the same way.
I totally get what you're saying. I just don't find them to be mutually exclusive. So I might have said that same first chapter, very similar to the way it is, but maybe she does a solid to Bucky K. And then later in the book, she calls in that favor, just so that it's not, it was the place where the theme song should start at the end of chapter 1, and it felt that way to me.
Yeah, and it is very Save the Cat, right? Like that is the Save the Cat prototype.
Right.
Like Vince was alluding to, the like, hey, intro the old world, show us the old world before you get on the adventure to the new world.
Yeah, and I like that aspect of it, and I hadn't thought of that. That
Yeah.
she's, it's showing her as being a bail bonds person or whatever she's doing, serving summons.
Serving summonses, yeah, a process server. That's what it is, process server. Yeah. Okay, other thoughts on the book? Anything else we wanted to talk about tonight?
The Chicago is nice.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I've only been there a few times, so I don't actually know. As somebody from that area, did it
I'm not from that area.
You're not from that. You write
but
that area.
I write in that area.
Yeah.
My wife is from outside of that area, and it's just a great place. And it's a great place that's not overused.
Yeah.
And there are so many Hitchcock finale locations that you could have, right? Like it's always something big, right? In Chicago, you've got the planetarium, you've got Soldier Field, you've got the Art Institute, you've got the John Hancock building. I mean, there's so many like great places, and they're not overused because they're not New York. So I thought she did it really well. I liked all the Chicago stuff.
Very cool. I'm a sucker for a diner scene. I just gotta say, I have a weird thing about scenes in restaurants. I just really love it. So I can read people eating pancakes all day long, and she did some good diner scenes. So I was in for that.
One of the things that I liked a lot, the owner of the diner is named Deke, and she created this really fun tension by being like, Deke is this monster that can just smash people, and he's dangerous, and he's gruff, and he keeps people on his toes. But we never met him. It was so funny. Like, I'm so stressed out about like meeting this character, and like, because we never exactly see this guy like the whole time.
That's
And
interesting.
I really like that, because like the way I think about it is like, you introduce a concept, you quickly resolve it, you move on, and it's just like you just keep on mentioning this D guy, but you don't meet him. And we have like all these friends that do that to us. It's like, oh, you should meet my friend whoever, and they're always doing the craziest things, and I really like that a lot.
Nice.
And the other thing she did is she would ask for something, but she
Oh, Vince, you froze on me.
Yeah.
I don't know if you froze on everybody else.
I lost him.
We'll give him 10. We'll give him 5 seconds. Tom, were you going to say something about Deke?
No, I was going to ask you before we let this go to talk about emotional flow, because I was thinking, because it's just been recently in the podcast, I was thinking about that while reading the book, and really we don't really get anyone else's emotional flow except Cass's, because it's so close to her. And mostly I thought she did a really good job with that. I sometimes felt like some of the emotional transitions were relying on actually things that happened in Cass's past. There was some times when she's getting sort of ramping up tension, and I think I would have felt more tense if I had read the first book and known like this is a trigger for her. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Vince, I'll come back to emotional flow. Vince, why don't you finish your thought? Sorry, we lost you in the middle of it.
Yeah.
No, I was like, I'm all done, and they're like, we can't hear Vince. Let's move on.
Sorry, Vince.
It's all right. I'm actually really interested in Tom's point.
So emotional flow in a mystery is a little bit different, because a lot of the emotions come from the unveiling of the story, right? Like the story of itself. And so I thought her scene construction was really great. And Tom, that's where I felt what you're feeling, that like, oh, a lot of times this scene construction leaned on things that happened in the past. So the one that's coming to mind that isn't a spoiler at all is the introduction of Weber, the introduction of the love interest. The emotional tone of that 100% depended on the emotional tone of what left off in the first book. She said it well, like she set the tone well, and it flowed well, and it did make me want to, like, man, I think we've already said this, like, I want more of this. I want to feel more of this. I want more of their relationship. I'd like to see more of how, like, the stubborn nature of her immediate rejection of him because he was married at the time has impacted the potential for their future relationship, right? Like, it left me wanting more. And part of the reason I'm struggling is because, like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because maybe we want to go buy book one. So I,
the emotional, we felt her emotional turmoil about this confusion about why this man is hanging around when she closed the book on him, and then him like dropping this new information.
Yeah. Yes. And she did that really well. I think, sorry, I'm still collecting you surprised me with a question, Tom.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, it's a good question. So, and I'm trying to think how to talk about it without getting too deep into the book. So, what'd you say?
You need a second?
No, I got it.
Okay.
So, I just need to talk it out. Because I can talk about the front of the book and not reveal a ton. So there's a like we said earlier, there's a cyclical pattern to what's going on, right? Like, especially in the front of the book, where like she refuses to help it happens that forces her engagement. So like she refuses to help at the diner, and Jung is like, well, I'm gonna go do it myself. And then Bucky shows up, and then she's kind of like pulled back in, and then he's in jail and she's pulled back in, right? Like, so there's this like flow of like, so I would describe the emotional tone as like resistance, and then like being pulled in until finally we get the like acceptance and full engagement into what's going on. And then the resistance flips against her and like is pushing her back. So there's like a pulling to a pushing is how I think of the emotional flow of the whole story. It clearly worked because we all read through the book and got to the end, and we're all highly engaged by it, right? Like, would I have planned that emotional flow? No, I wouldn't have, but I'm also not writing mysteries. So yeah, so those are my muddled thoughts on the emotional flow of the book. Anybody else have any thoughts on the emotional flow of the book as I like give you nothing and use a lot of words to do it?
No, that's fine. I was
Welcome.
just making more scene based. And what's
Okay.
odd is I had no problem with the scenes with her and Weber. It was, to me, that was romantic play. That was flirting. That was uncertainty of desire. That all worked for me. What I was having trouble with was there was a scene with ladders that was very, very stressful for her. Then there was a scene with fire that she was quipping during. And I was having trouble being like, why is this thing causing this emotional and this
jump?
Other thing is not.
So when we think about emotion of the reader and emotion of the characters, we want to think about the emotional intonation of each scene independently and how they build on each other, as well as the themes that Jeff is talking about. So if we take a step back and we just deconstruct each scene and pick up on the emotional intonation. And when you're talking about the fire scene, are you talking about the fire scene related to her car?
No, in the garage.
Okay.
With Whip.
Okay.
It's fairly serious. I would say probably one of the most serious places in the book. And it didn't seem to have the emotional heft that other less serious scenes did.
So, and this goes back to her character wheel. When Cass is put in a stressful situation, her cop instinct comes out. So what feels really stressful to us is likely going to be more, this is her training. So where we and this is where like we as the reader don't necessarily have to match the emotional journey of the main character. So again, we need to think about, what do we want our character to feel? And then what do we want the story to feel and the reader to feel? And I would say that like following that scene, we felt the emotional heft of the scene on Cass in her next scene. So we're up here, even though Cass is down here. After the scene, we're coming down, but she's staying exactly where she is. So we're like hitting each other here, we're passing, and then we de-escalate together. So, I mean, I guess it's just a different way of looking at.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, my character gets a bit slap happy when things get dangerous. I was wondering, looking at it, whether it had to do with the fact that Whip was there.
Possibly.
That she sort of lets herself freak out when she's by herself, and she goes all hard business when someone else is there. But for a book where there's a lot of interior monologue, there was an opportunity for that to be sort of expressed.
Yeah, and I think that I hadn't thought of that, Tom, but that actually makes sense because we talked about earlier how her voice modulates based on who she's with. That may be impacting it. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't Yeah, I have to think more about it. That's a really excellent point. Yeah, I don't think I didn't feel like I mean, yeah, I don't know. I'm just going to leave it there. Great point.
If you're listening, go read the book. Write in the comments.
Yeah, tell us what you think about Tracy's book. Write in the comments. Tell us. Any other pieces we wanted to talk about? Yeah, Tom's going to keep me up at night now thinking about the emotional flow of this book. I'm going to put out charts and graph it out. Any other thoughts we want to talk about?
I would read the other books because I want to see that character deepen and change, and I really hope she does that because it's an awesome character. And I think more in detective series than in thrillers, you have an opportunity to do that with the character, whereas thrillers, sometimes the character sort of shows up as Jason Bourne every time, whereas detectives, if you read like, you know, Dennis Lehane or, you know, just some of my favorites, you really the characters really grow and change over the series. So I'd like to read more and see what happens with this character because she's great.
Yeah, and I think I can't really pinpoint why this is, but her character she wasn't, right? Like she's not, but it gave me the feeling of like a dirty cop novel. You know what I'm talking about? Like the novel where the cop is like dirty and corrupt and you're following him around the whole time. I think part of it was the way that she engaged with everybody and how she had her own monologue running in the background at the same time. That may just be my lack of reading, but that's what came to mind when I was reading that. And it kind of had that, and they have that, now that I think about it, they have that same kind of plot where it's not the mystery reverse or the big reveal, and it's rather the like pull towards something and then being aggressively attacked upon kind of feel. Maybe that's why I'm jumping there, but that's where my head went, kind of like a David Simon, you know, dirty cop direction. But yeah.
Well, yeah, I didn't get that. I got very much a Sarah Paresky.
And I haven't read it.
Sue Grafton.
Yeah, Sue Grafton. Yeah.
And I thought she held her own in that regard. Yeah.
Yeah. Vince and Laura, any other thoughts?
Just lots of glowering in this book.
Nice. Lots of glowering.
That's all I got.
That's all you got. Lots of glowering. It's a good note. Laura, any thoughts? We'll give you the last word.
Wow, that makes me feel so important. No, I think Clark did a fantastic job, you know, taking, you know, we talk about all these things week after week about what makes good dialogue. And we say things like characters have voices and they modulate in different scenes. And her main character modulated in different scenes. Her side characters, you know, we didn't talk about Ben, but Ben changes in different scenes based off of the stress level when they're talking about different things. Like the scene in the kitchen with Whip, Ben is cop through and through. But when he's talking to her about her love interest, he's all best friend, right? Like the voices change and they change from moment to moment. It was fun and it was witty and the story was good. And, you know, we as readers don't always look for the literary in the books that we read. Sure, if we're reading, you know, Beloved, we're looking for the literary. When we're reading Tracy Clark, we don't want to have to think. We just want to enjoy the story. We just want to enjoy the characters. And Clark gave us that in this. And, you know, for whatever we found that we think that she could have done differently, we're all saying, hey, I'd read another one. So she did her job.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will just say, Tracy, if you listen to this, you are our third book review and you are on the line with Toni Morrison and Ernest Hemingway. So well done.
And we all know I rank you well ahead of Hemingway. So
that's right. Laura's book. in Laura's rating scale. Okay, for the next book club book, I'm actually gonna let the Slack vote. So I'm gonna put 4 books up, and the Slack is gonna pick. So I'll announce it in a couple weeks what the next book is.
So if you want to have a vote, join the Slack channel.
Oh, nice plug. I was gonna say that. I was gonna say, because I clearly am not allowed to pick books anymore.
I feel like that's
So-
why you bring me on, is to just plug the things that come next. Like, you leave these doorways open, and I'm like, but I
Oh.
think we need to say that. So
I think we need to say that.
I
Yeah.
will shamelessly plug the Dialogue Doctor for you.
Nice. All right. If you want to pick the next book, come on the Slack. I'm going to give you 4 options, and we can pick from that. And I'm open to suggestions too, because I actually only have 3 options in mind. So if you got a suggestion, there I can see Tom gleaming, his eye gleaming. He's got a suggestion. All right. I'm going to turn off the recording. Thanks, guys, and Laura, for doing this. It was great.